From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Starting to roll.
I finally decided there's not a normal year here.
How rains are helping Texas producers in cotton country. New details about just how many acres in Ukraine could be impacted by the destruction of a key dam there. As USDA forecasters issue new numbers when it comes to old and new crops here in the U.S. But how big of an impact could South America have?
We just got to realize that this Brazil crop is huge.
A deep dive into the numbers and what they mean right now on AgDay. Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. USDA on Friday making some minor revisions to the grain balance sheet. That includes lowering corn exports, which in part pressured corn to end the week lower. The agency not revising corn yields or production right now, but it did increase old crop ending stocks up 35 million bushels to 1.4 billion bushels. It's due to a cut in exports and expectations of competition from Brazil in the next few months. That puts new crop carryover for corn at more than 2.2 billion. As for soybeans, again, no change to production right now, but it increased old crop ending stocks by 15 million bushels based on lower than expected shipments, coming in now at 230 million bushels, and a new crop carryover was raised to 350 million. As for wheat, 598 million bushels still in the bin, 562 million bushels for next year's carryover. And USDA did change the wheat production forecast, boosting yields up slightly on higher hard red winter wheat production, offsetting a cut in soft red winter and white winter. The all wheat yield now stands at 44.9 bushels an acre, which is still below last year. AgDay's Michelle Rook joins us. And Michelle, the markets saw mixed reaction.
Clinton, usually the market doesn't trade this report very long before changing its focus to weather. Plus, USDA generally doesn't make any supply or production changes in this report, but instead waits until the July WSDA when they can incorporate those June acreage figures. However, they did make some adjustments to demand, and it was a bearish reminder that the U.S. is just not competitive globally. While market analysts think USDA may need to cut corn yield in the next WSDA, the slow demand for U.S. corn indicated in this report will offset that. USDA cut exports another 50 million bushels, which raised the ending stocks 35 million. Plus, USDA raised Brazilian corn production 2 million metric tons, which will also compete against the U.S.
We just got to realize that this Brazil crop is huge. It's going to be undercutting the market prices at this time frame, and we're just going to have a hard time moving things. And that's probably the biggest bearish factor that's out there, despite the weather that's going on. People talk about weather and why haven't we rallied? It's the pure fact that we just can't move this product, and that demand's going to trump, anything that we see on the weather front, barring it really getting severe.
Ending stocks on soybeans came in 15 million bushels higher than last month, with a subsequent cut in exports despite some recent soybean sales.
But again, showing that pattern that we're just maybe a little heavy on the demand side, adding a little more to carry out, and then that just trickles through without any changes in terms of yield acres or production for the fall.
And USDA also raised Brazilian soybean production 1 million metric tons to 156 million, which is a record. And with their lower prices, they're undercutting the U.S. in the export market. That will continue to be a headwind on rallies in beans in the short term. I'm Michelle Rook reporting for AgDay.
Some rain finally pushed through some areas of the Corn Belt over the weekend. Meteorologist Matt Engelbrecht lets us know if more is on the way this week. Matt.
Yeah, take you back the last couple of days through the weekend. The estimated rainfall, again, this is going to be Doppler radar indicated rainfall, finally picking up some rainfall. Not a lot, but enough. And this is going to kind of start that switch back over to more of an active pattern. Not a crazy active pattern, but enough to give us some relief in drought-stricken areas. Now, this is a precipitation estimate through Sunday, so this includes Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, with a couple of bullseyes into Illinois and back down into the southwest. Remember, into Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio is where that drought continues to increase, so about a quarter to half an inch of rainfall. In some locations, a little bit more than that should help. We'll take a look at where the pattern sets up regarding the jet stream coming up in just a little bit. And go ahead and take a look at this rainbow. Almost full. We lose it a little bit on the left side. This is coming in from Kansas, and it's always a great start to the day and the week. when you can spot a rainbow. That means two things. The sun is out and the rain is coming down. Now, Lindy has sent this one in. And we'll, of course, talk more about that extended forecast coming up in just a bit.
The flooding continues in Ukraine following the destruction of a major dam. Now the Ministry of Agriculture warns it could impact more than 1 million acres of cropland. Ukrainian ag leaders say the collapse of the Nova Kakhovka Dam is likely to cut crop production by millions of tons. They say some 1.2 million acres could, quote, turn into a desert due to a lack of irrigation. Now, without the reservoir, vegetables, melons, grains, and oilseeds are likely to see a reduction in water availability. It's also impacting some navigation along the Dnipro River, an agricultural export route for Ukraine. Former cattleman sentenced last year for an alleged ghost cattle scheme is being ordered to pay even more. Cody Easterday, the former rancher from eastern Washington, now being ordered to pay a $1 million fine. An order also permanently stops Easterday from trading. In October of last year, Easterday was sentenced to 11 years behind bars. He was also ordered to pay $244 million in restitution to Tyson Fresh Meats and another victim. Easterday was accused of charging for the costs of buying and feeding as many as 265,000 cattle that simply did not exist. At the time, Easterday told the court he had a gambling addiction. California is working to help increase home ownership for the state's farm workers. Governor Gavin Newsom awarding $16 million in grants that will support 5 programs. Now, those programs help to build or purchase homes for lower-income farm workers, along with other programs to help them become or remain homeowners through mortgage assistance. Also included, San Mateo County will receive $5 million to purchase homes for survivors of a January shooting at farms in Half Moon Bay. Newsom says the grants will help make the California dream a reality for many farm workers by helping them become homeowners and lay a foundation for the future generations. The report is in, so what's next for commodity markets? We'll take a look at the week ahead, coming up next in analysis. And later, first Texas cotton growers were too dry, then too wet. We'll catch up with farmers near Lubbock to hear their thoughts on 2023 in the country. A new study says more than half of Iowa's farmland is now leased out. According to an Iowa State University study, 58% of the state's farmland is now leased. That's a 5% increase from the last time the same study was conducted back in 2017. Researchers say it represents roughly 1 million acres over 5 years. The survey also found the average age of Iowa's farmland owners is still increasing. In 1982, only 29% of Iowa farmland was owned by those over the age of 65. That number now stands at 66%. Women own 46% of the land, and they hold a larger share among senior owners. Experts say several factors are contributing to this, including the increase in using farmland as an inheritance or long-term investment, fewer young people going into farming, and those young farmers facing large startup costs, along with a lack of succession planning. Soybeans surge on the latest numbers from USDA. Michelle Rook has more on what to watch in the week ahead with today's Markets Now.
Grains closed mixed on Friday after the WASDE report. Jim McCormick with agmarket.net joining us. Not a lot of big changes in the report on Friday, Jim, but it was a reminder that this supply situation is not getting smaller, it's still getting bigger.
Exactly. Unfortunately, the government had to make the adjustments they did. Exports have been disappointing the last couple of weeks. They essentially acknowledged it, cut exports by 50 million on the corn. They did cut imports a little bit. The net effect of 35 million increase in carryout. The world number got a little bit bigger as well. So, plain and simple, Michelle, that's not bullish when carryout's growing. It shows you that the prices need to go lower to stimulate demand.
So do you think at this point USDA is still overestimating demand then?
For the old crop, I think they're in line right now with the adjustment on the June WASDE. I think they're getting very close to it. For the new crop balance sheet, I think there's still adjustments to be made. The reality is they're looking for they're currently using a very big revision up on exports of over 375 million, I believe. Same thing on the feed side of the equation. So those two combined categories, increasing demand year on year over 700 million, just seems unlikely. So I would expect for that demand number to be revised lower down the line. And I think what will happen is they will correspond the revision of that demand lower as they revise the supply lower due to the drought we're seeing in the Midwest.
Yeah, how much of a drop though in supply would we need to have to overcome these demand figures being lower?
Well, the reality is right now, you could essentially drop the national yield 8-9 bushels, and that would be a little over 700 million reduction in supply, which essentially, if you did that, you could cut feed and residual demand, leave it unchanged year on year, do the same thing for wheat, or excuse me, export demand, leave it unchanged year on year. They'd offset each other and you'd be back to the same ending stocks. So the reality is you probably got to get a yield below a 10 bushel drop before the market really could get really concerned.
But the rally in beans on Friday, Jim, was not due to the report. It was soybean oil, wasn't it?
Bean oil is what the exciting thing is right now. We're seeing a lot of money come back into the bean oil. It's a renewable industry talk is getting exciting again. We're actually exporting beans to Europe right now, Michelle. They're crushing those beans, keeping the meal over there, and they're bringing that oil back to the U.S. either via straight oil or potentially diesel. But either way, being the fact they're crushing U.S. beans, they get a RIN tagged onto those beans, and that makes that economically justifiable to do.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Jim McCormick with agmarket.net. We'll have more Ag Day coming up.
To contact Jim McCormick at Ag Market, call 844-4AG-MARKET or visit their website at www.agmarket.net. Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
Just a little bit ago, we looked at the rainfall estimate through the weekend, so I wanted to put the drought monitor back up for this week. And now we're going to take into account that rainfall that came down this past weekend in Thursday's drought monitor when it is released. You can see now some of the bullseye rainfall came down where we need it most: Missouri, Illinois, into Indiana. Not so much back up into Nebraska or even into parts of Omaha, as well as Oklahoma, where it is still rather dry. That includes Kansas. Now, the drought monitor is going to be an interesting look coming up on Thursday. We didn't get too much rain where we're seeing the extreme or exceptional drought. More so back into the Midwest is where we saw some much needed rain come through. Wasn't a lot. The good news is, though, it's not that hot, so not a lot of evaporation going on with the rain that came down on Saturday, Sunday, and even early this morning. Now, here's a look at the jet stream on Monday. There's another upper level low, which is going to help to open things up and move them along going through the rest of the week. It's not going to be as backed up or stacked up as what we had last week or even the week before. And you kind of see how this low sits right there. Any energy that comes back up from the northwest is going to follow back down here to the south. That energy is going to combine with some Gulf moisture. That's why we see increased rain chances through the plains and the Midwest this week. Better, not great, but better than what we've had, where it's just completely shut off in regards to the faucet. This pattern does support a little bit more increasing rain chances, and the ridge that is set to develop isn't as strong. Remember last week when we looked at the jet stream, these lines were way up here to the north, which kept a lot of that energy down. Cutoff low starts to sink down to the south, and where you see that circle is where those rain chances continue to be present. Here's a look at the temperature outlook. So the ridge is still going to be there, and it is going to be warm back up towards Canada and the United States border. Cooler where that low is located, and then warmer where it is not, back into Texas and Louisiana. As for that precipitation outlook, you see a lot more green on that map than we've had the last couple of weeks. Let's go and start off in Colorado. Scattered thunderstorms later on this afternoon, high of 65 degrees, low of 51. And also looking at South Dakota, mostly sunny, high around 80. And let's go and try this one in Nevada. Winnemucca. Did I get that right? Winnemucca. Sunny, high of 80.
It's not just grain growing season, it's also hay season. And Machinery Pete has your equipment needs covered. That's next. And later, signs of hope for cotton growers in the Texas Panhandle. Recent rains helping plant seeds of optimism today in the country.
All right, folks, it's June, so let's talk used hay equipment values. Now, you might remember a couple weeks ago I told you about a recent auction, online auction out of Washington, Iowa, where this 2011 John Deere 338 small square baler sold for $20,000, set an all-time record high auction price by $3,000. Now today, let's talk about a little larger hay equipment. So last Monday on a consignment auction out of Ashley, North Dakota, Kind of an unusual item here, this 2019 Vermeer ZR5 1200 self-propelled baler with 12,500 bales through it, sold for $146,475. Now, that's the first one I've seen sold at auction, and I think that's a pretty darn strong price, considering the current average dealer advertised price on a ZR5 1200 self-propelled baler is $183,750. So again, that auction price, almost 80% of that, that's very strong. On that same sale last Monday in Ashley, North Dakota, this 2019 Case H RB 565 Premium Round Baler with 9,151 bales through it sold for $30,000. And again, very strong price. That's actually tied for the third highest auction price ever on an RB 565 Premium. And for comparison, a year ago, April of 22, online auction out of Wyoming, we saw another 19 model RB 565 Premium with far fewer bales through it, just over 3,800 bales, sell for the same money, $30,000. So again, with 9,151 bales through it last Monday, 30K, very strong. And last Wednesday, online auction out of Vassar, Michigan, our friends at Albrecht Auction Service sold this 2012 New Holland BR 7060 round baler for $22,250. That's the second highest auction price in 15 months on a BR 7060.
All right, thanks, Pete. Well, up next, Texas cotton planting is running behind, but rainfall is running way ahead of last year. We're headed for Lubbock and cotton country next.
In the Country on Ag Day is brought to you by Pivot Bio. What if you had the nitrogen you need already on seed? Pivot Bio is the first company to apply nitrogen on seed. The nitrogen you need, now on seed, from Pivot Bio. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Last year, much of the nation's largest cotton growing area was left barren. This year, farmers near Lubbock, Texas are back in those same fields sowing seeds of hope. And as the Texas Farm Bureau shared with us, recent rains are weaving optimism for this year's crop.
We can't wait for the normal year. But you know what? I finally decided there's not a normal year here. Last year was just dry planting. The ground is so dry that there's nothing underneath it. There's no moisture to be planting in. This year's been good because it's been wet. First time, but it just started raining. We're starting to plant in that moisture and I feel really good about it. We've been dry planting for the last 5 years. We hadn't had this kind of moisture, but it's gonna have to rain because the deep moisture's not there. We just hadn't had the winter rain or anything. My name's Walter Christenek. Me and my son farm about 5,000 acres. We grow cotton, and we're currently between Whitehall and Anton, Texas. My family moved to Whitehall in 1960. I was 1 year old, so I've lived here all my life. I've been farming personally myself since 1986. But grew up on a cotton farm all my life. I have 3 boys and one of them's farming with me. You know, normally that's what's good about West Texas is normally our rainfall comes from April till September. Well, it hasn't done that in a long time. Since 2011, we haven't had the correct rainfall at the time that it normally does here. It's time for it to switch. And I keep telling my son that and he just rolls his eyes at me and he goes, I don't know, Daddy, this looks like drought all the time. I said, well, you know, when you've been farming as long as I have, you've seen a bunch of it. I mean, it's just different every year. You just got to be ready to go. We went to minimum till farming. We try to have a cover crop. In other words, we never plow the ground. Nearly 90% of our farms are that way. I've got one farm I hadn't plowed in 7 years. I love the concept. I think it's going to keep working. We've been working on this for 4 years, but we've had drought. So this is the first year where I can see we've had this 4 inches and no moisture went off the field. It stayed on the field, and that was the best thing. Every year we hope to make a crop, you know, so we don't need a whole lot of rain, but we need it at the right time. It's been really a hit and miss these last several years, and this year we're going to get it up. But the question is it going to rain the next time to keep it going because we don't have any deep moisture here. It's like a poker hand. You've got 3 cards and you're waiting for the last 2. Farmers talk negative, but they're the most positive people in the world because if you wasn't positive, you wouldn't be doing this. You can't raise kids on any better spot. And my son come home farm with it, got my grandkids in this country, and it's just a good life. And a lot of people, when they get 64 to 65, they're ready to quit. I don't ever see it happening. Farmers just keep going until it's over and let the kids take it over, and what they do with it's up to them.
And our thanks to the Texas Farm Bureau for sharing that story with us. And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.